I'm going to explain to you how to become a cybersecurity engineer, but it's important to understand that there are various sub-specializations that fall under the umbrella of being a cybersecurity engineer. Therefore, there are various pathways that you can take to become a cybersecurity engineer. These roles are highly paid, and organizations are always looking for people with the skill set of a cybersecurity engineer. While these roles are highly technical by nature, I will give you a step-by-step roadmap to get you to become a cybersecurity engineer, even if you don't have a degree or any technical knowledge. This video will upset a lot of gatekeepers because the word engineer seems to be very triggering. Some people get really defensive about using the word engineer, and they insist that you cannot call yourself an engineer unless you go to university and do an engineering degree. So in this video, I'm going to piss them off so bad that I'm going to help you to become not only a cybersecurity engineer, but a world-class cybersecurity engineer without needing to do a degree. Let's get into it. First thing is your starting point. You could be someone who already works in IT, you could be a programmer or a network engineer, or perhaps you work in help desk, or you could be a seasoned systems engineer who works with Microsoft Windows or even Linux, or you could be a university student, or you could be working in a completely different industry like nursing or accounting, or perhaps you work in a warehouse. No matter what your starting point is, we first need to understand what cybersecurity is before we start engineering solutions to solve cybersecurity problems. So you may have some cybersecurity knowledge, or you may have zero cybersecurity knowledge. Either way, there are non-negotiable cybersecurity principles that you must know to maximize your chances of landing a cybersecurity engineer role. These principles will help you both in the interview process, but they will also help ease your transition so the things you learn make a lot more sense. There are different ways to learn the cybersecurity principles that I'm talking about, but my recommended way is by either doing the Google Cybersecurity Cert or the Microsoft Cybersecurity Analyst Cert, because they not only teach you the fundamental principles of cybersecurity, but they also include hands-on labs where you get to practice what you learned, so things make a lot more sense and you can use that hands-on practice later on in your career as a cybersecurity engineer. The Google Cybersecurity Cert includes labs that teach you Linux, MySQL, and Python, and the Microsoft Cybersecurity Analyst Cert will introduce you to the Microsoft Azure Cloud and the Microsoft Sentinel platform. I have separate videos where I do a deep dive in each of these programs, which I'll leave a link to them in the description box below. But before you ask, the answer is yes. If you've done the CompTIA Security Plus or the IBM Cybersecurity Analyst Certification or the ISC2CC, these are all fine too. They will introduce you to the cybersecurity fundamental principles. And if you find that you have gaps in your knowledge, you can always go back and do the Google Cybersecurity Cert or the Microsoft Cybersecurity Analyst Cert. Now, if you're watching this video, you probably are passionate about a career in cybersecurity, or perhaps you have a desire or a calling deep down that's drawing you to cybersecurity, whether to fight cybercrimes or to do something you're passionate about that has career progress opportunities. But if you choose the pathway of becoming a cybersecurity engineer, you need to know that this is the pathway of solving cybersecurity problems by installing, configuring, and troubleshooting cybersecurity solutions. These solutions can be a device or a group of devices or a piece of code or a set of tools designed to accomplish the task of stopping hackers from breaking into an organization or a government agency. Therefore, it's crucial to understand why you're building and configuring these tools. But the dilemma that we have is that there are so many tools out there. But not only that, a lot of those tools are completely different than one another. For example, there is no similarities between something like a firewall and a DevOps scanner that scan code for secure coding principles. They require completely different skill sets. The firewall would require deep networking understanding, while the DevOps tool require understanding of programming and best practices for programming when it comes to secure coding. Now, the good news is there is a beginner-friendly training course that will quickly introduce you to all of these concepts at the same time. But not only that, it also have hands-on labs where you get to practice all of these principles and tools. The course is from TryHackMe. It's called the Security Engineer Training. It starts by introducing you to the different security engineer career pathways. It introduces you to basic principles principles such as cryptography and identity and access management. Then it goes over some of the basic principles of GRC, and it will even get you to do some vulnerability management scanning. Then on section 3, it talks about network and system security. This is meant to introduce you to the principles of being a systems engineer or a network security engineer, and it does a pretty good job at introducing you to Linux, Microsoft, Active Directory, network security protocols, virtualization, and it even introduces you to the cloud. Now section 4 is my favorite section because it talks about application security. So it takes you through the OWASP top 10, and then it talks about API security and the software development lifecycle. It will then introduces you to SAST and DAST, which we will talk about later in this video. The last section of the course talks about incident management and incident response. That will introduce you to what a cybersecurity engineer does when it comes to incident detection and response. These are really extremely important concepts that you need to make sure that you understand really well, because the last thing I want is for you to become a security engineer who is good with the tools but doesn't understand why we use the tool and what purpose they serve. Trust me, I've met those engineers. They are not good engineers. We need to know how to use the tool, but we also need to understand the why behind the tools. This is what separates the bad engineer from the really good and great engineers. Once you finish this training course, you will have a pretty good idea about the different areas and different tasks that a cybersecurity engineer does. After that, we need to pick a specialization and do further training into that specialization to help us land our first cybersecurity engineer role. The first specialization is the detection engineer. The detection engineer is a professional who specializes in detecting cyber attacks and malicious activities in the network. And this is a huge task because hackers are really good at hiding their tracks. There is always new threats, there is always new attacks. So a detection engineer is someone who's extremely busy and does an extremely important job. In the industry, to detect cyber attacks, we use a tool that we refer to as SIEM. This is a centralized log server where we get logs from everywhere in the network, and using that SIEM, we create what we refer to as detection use cases. So these detection use cases are an automated way for this SIEM to detect unusual activity. The detection engineer is the individual who creates those detection use cases. They refine those detection use cases, and they are always working towards creating more detection use cases and improves the ones that are already there. Now, the most prominent SIEMs in the industry are Splunk, which still has the biggest market share in the industry, but then we also have Microsoft Sentinel, which lives in the Microsoft Azure cloud. Now, the good news is Splunk offers completely free training that can take you from knowing nothing about Splunk to becoming an expert in Splunk. I know it's crazy, but it's completely free and it's really good quality training. So if you want to become a detection engineer, I recommend you do all of the training courses on the Splunk website, starting from the very basic ones all the way to the most advanced courses. You need to become a Splunk wizard because this is the skill that will lead you to becoming a cybersecurity engineer who specializes in detection. Now, getting your first job as a detection engineer will always be a challenge because you don't have the experience that organizations are asking for. I've seen people get their first job as detection engineers using two methods. The first one is simply called applying to every job that's advertised, which I highly recommend that you do once you finish all of these Splunk courses, and once you feel you're confident enough with using Splunk, then you should be applying to every job advertised that's asking for Splunk skills. The second way that I've seen people get hired as detection engineer is I've seen individuals who work in help desk, and some of them work in the networking team or in the IT team, but then once they start learning Splunk, they start offering their help to the cybersecurity team. They offer automating some tasks, they offer helping with detection use cases. Once you have good Splunk skills, there are many ways where you can demonstrate that you have the skills, and this way they were able to be hired into the cybersecurity team to work as full-time detection engineers. I've seen it happens. There is always a need for people with good Splunk skills. Now, the third way that I've seen people get hired as detection engineers is they simply start as cybersecurity analysts. There is a fine line between being a cybersecurity analyst that works in detecting and responding to cyber attacks and a cybersecurity engineer who specializes in detecting cybersecurity threats. In some environments, that individual is the same, so you perform cybersecurity analyst tasks and cybersecurity detection engineer tasks. The team is simply too small, so you'll end up doing everything. So my advice to you is to be a little bit more flexible in your job search. Just type the word Splunk and apply to everything. This, in my opinion, is the best way to land your first job. Now, if you want to learn Microsoft Sentinel, which is an important SIEM, usually what I want you to do is to become good with the Microsoft Cloud Platform, which is Microsoft Azure. Then you can combine that with Microsoft Sentinel skills. I will explain to you how to do that later in this video when we talk about the cloud security engineer pathway. The next important specialization is the automation engineer. The word automation is broad, but in every environment we always need someone to automate repetitive tasks. Now that automation can happen in the help desk or in the network or in the cybersecurity operations center. Now I want to prepare you to become an automation engineer in the cybersecurity operations center. Now there is levels to this game. Automation can be a simple scripts or it can be a complicated program with visual dashboards. Now this is where I will lose some of you, but if you want to become an automation engineer, you have to love coding because this is the coding specialty. You don't need to learn every language under the sun. In fact, we will pick one programming language and we will get really good at it, but we're not gonna do so in a random manner. Instead, I will focus your learning into learning and practicing with cybersecurity tasks relevant to the cybersecurity team, so you can land your automation engineer job within the cybersecurity team, because those are the ones who will pay you the most. Trust me on this one. Now the Google cybersecurity cert will get you started with Python, which is the language that we will use for this specialization, but this is where the real fun begins because we will use it for cybersecurity purposes, and that's a specialized use case. So to do that, the first training that we will do is called Python for Cybersecurity. It's from the InfoSec Institute. I'll put a link to it in the description box below. It will introduce you to how to use Python for cybersecurity tasks. It's really good because it will get you practicing with extremely important concepts. So the first module will be an introduction. The second module will get you to deep dive into pretty cool topics such as persistence, execution, and privilege escalation. If you've ever worked as a cyber analyst or if you ever learned any topics related to cybersecurity incident response, this course will teach you how to use Python to accomplish these tasks. Extremely useful course that I recommend for anyone who wants to be an automation engineer, but I also recommend it to cyber analysts as well because it will make you a better cybersecurity professional. Now once you finish that, the next course that I want you to do is also from the InfoSec Institute. It's an advanced Python scripting for cybersecurity. So it will take everything that you've learned in the first course and it will build on top of it, where it will get you to perform even more advanced cybersecurity tasks using Python. Now once you finish these two courses, you will be pretty competent with using Python, and at this stage you can actually start applying to jobs as an automation engineer or an automation specialist that's focused on cybersecurity. But if you've been watching my videos for a while, you know I'm big on hands-on practice and practical projects. So I've curated a list of practical projects for you that you can use as a portfolio to help you apply to your first cybersecurity engineer role. The first one is called Python scripting for DevOps. It will take you 2 to 3 hours to finish this project. It's pretty basic, but it will get you to apply your Python skills within a DevOps environment, which is something you might run into as an automation engineer. The next project will also take you about 1 to 3 hours to finish, where you will use Python to create a disk usage report for Linux. This is a traditional task that we used to perform as Unix engineers, so it's a pretty useful way to get to apply your Python skills and gain some more Linux skills. Speaking of Unix, I have a completely free weekly cybersecurity newsletter where I share with you tips on how to land your first cybersecurity job. Sometimes they are a follow-up on the videos, and sometimes these are things that I didn't have time to mention in the videos. So if you haven't signed up yet, please head to unixguy.com and sign up today. The next project is a little bit more advanced and it's cybersecurity focused. It will get you to write your own Python tool to footprint a web application. So it will show you how to install and use Docker to host your private web application. You will learn how basic web applications work. You will write a Python script to read from a text file. This is a more advanced Python project where you will learn a little bit more about web hosting, about using Docker, but you will also perform a pretty cool cybersecurity task. The last one is also cybersecurity related, and it's a little bit harder than the ones that you performed before. In this one, you will learn a little bit more about encryption and how you can use Python to encrypt data. Now, by the end of all of these projects, you will be extremely confident with using Python. And trust me, at this stage, you will have an extremely valuable skills that employers are looking for. So please start applying to jobs because organizations will want to hire you. Now, before I move on, just a word for those who think they hate coding. I've heard this from so many people before. They absolutely hate coding. In fact, on a weekly basis, I get questions like, do I need to learn coding to work in cybersecurity? And as you know, the answer is usually no, you don't need coding to work in cybersecurity. But if you want to become an automation engineer, you need coding. Now, some people genuinely don't like coding, but in my opinion, when someone tells me they don't like coding, it just tells me that they haven't spent enough time trying to learn coding. I could say say that I don't like martial arts, but the truth is I haven't spent enough time learning martial arts. Therefore, I think I hate martial arts. So if you think you hate coding, my recommendation to you is just start doing some Python scripting, start doing some of these courses that I recommended, and you'd be surprised. Maybe you'll end up loving coding, and perhaps it will be your specialty. A cybersecurity professional who knows a programming language, this is like a secret weapon, because there is a lot that you can accomplish with a programming language that is simply not possible otherwise. The third specialization is the application security engineer. As the name implies, the application security engineer is someone who specializes in securing applications. Those applications can be standalone applications, they can be mobile application, or they can be web applications. The good news is the TryHackMe security engineer training course does a pretty good job at introducing you to the vast majority of topics that you will need as an application security engineer. So what we can do here is we can further strengthen our understanding and knowledge of the fundamental important aspects of becoming an application security engineer. There is only one training course that I want you to do here, which is focused on the OWASP top 10. The TryHackMe training course does a good job at introducing you to these concepts, but I want you to do this one to further improve your understanding. And the reason why I want you to do it is because your bread and butter as an application security engineer is the OWASP top 10. You need to be an absolute expert in the OWASP top 10, but this will lead me to the biggest dilemma with application security. You see, application security professionals disagree on a very fundamental issue, which is, should application security engineers be ethical hacker, meaning should they be able to do penetration testing on web applications, or is learning the fundamentals of application security concepts such as OWASP top 10 is enough to be a good application security engineer? To be honest with you, the answer is a little bit more nuanced, because I think both sides have merit to their arguments. So what should you do? Let me clarify. To understand this, you need to understand the difference between SAST and DAST. SAST is basically the static analysis of an application. This is where application developers have written the code, maybe some of it, maybe all of it, and you can come and analyze this code. That can happen through running a secure code scanner, or you can read that code and interpret it to make sure that they followed the OWASP top 10 recommendations, for example. During this phase, you don't really need to do any penetration testing, because just a secure code review is enough. But when you do DAST, which is dynamic analysis of applications, that's when we need to perform ethical hacking. Now, from what I've seen in the industry, people who do application security, they are not the same people who do the penetration test. In the real world, we usually have an external organization. They come and they perform the penetration test, because we need an independent entity to tell us the problem within the code. So as an application security professional, you're kind of the first level of defense, because you catch these problems, you get them fixed before the application is finished. This way, when the ethical hackers come and test the application, there is very little to find. Now, my verdict, if you want to become a really good application security engineer, is first off, you need to follow all the recommendations that I've outlined before. So do the TryHackMe security engineer training, then do the OWASP top 10 training. That's your basic fundamentals. I believe the next step for you is to learn a programming language, because it's really hard to analyze code and find problems with codes if you don't know how to code yourself. So a good suggestion for you as an application security engineer is to do the Python recommendations that I've outlined in the previous section, because that knowledge will make you a really good application security engineer. Now, as far as learning penetration testing for application security engineer, I think it's not necessary. I think it's a little bit of an overkill, but if you've done all of the recommendations that I've outlined before and you've even learned Python, I think the next step for you is to practice those OWASP top 10 recommendations in a lab environment. And the good news is there is a completely free training and free hands-on lab from PortSwigger. This is extremely useful because they have individual labs for each and every topic in the OWASP top 10, where you will get to practice and see how these vulnerabilities look like and how you can fix them. I can't recommend these courses enough for you if you want to be a really good application security engineer. And trust me, some of the biggest organizations in the industry like Google and Meta are always looking for good application security engineers. So if this is your jam, you will do really well. The next one is the systems and network security engineers. To be completely honest with you, I almost didn't include this one in this video, but I've kept it here just for the sake of completion, but also because I know some of you are interested in this pathway. This is the individual who configures the firewall, the proxy, the WAF. Also, this is the individual who perhaps configure Microsoft Active Directory, or they do some kind of a system security tasks such as hardening Windows OS or hardening Linux OS. Now, the problem with this specialization, and the reason why I didn't want to include it here is because the truth is this doesn't really fall under cybersecurity. The title have the word security in it, and the cybersecurity team need these tasks to be performed, but usually the individual who perform these tasks is someone who's first and foremost a really good network engineer or a really good system engineer. So if you want to be the network security engineer who configures the firewall or the proxy or the WAF, you actually need to be a network engineer who then learns these tools. In terms of training, if you're a network engineer, then Cisco has a set of free training that's focused on cybersecurity that you can do, and likewise Palo Alto have also a set of free training that's focused on their own products and their own firewalls. But other than that, just know that these titles, while they have the word security in them, they are really network engineers that perform an extremely important task for the organization. Now the next specialization is the cloud security engineer. The cloud security engineer is someone who is really good with the cloud. They are a cloud engineer first and foremost, but then they also have cybersecurity skills and they know how to implement cybersecurity recommendations within the cloud environment. I've said this before and I will say it again, but combining cloud skills with cybersecurity skills is potentially the best thing that you can do to your career, because there is a huge demand for people with cloud skills and cybersecurity skills. The main cloud platform that you need to learn are the Amazon AWS cloud, the Microsoft Azure cloud, and to a lesser extent the Google cloud. And one thing to know about all of these platforms is that they're extremely similar. So if you get good with one of these platforms, then it's really easy to switch to other platforms. They work exactly the same, just the naming convention is different. Now, if you want to become a cloud security engineer, there is a cloud security focused certification from each of these vendors. So from AWS, there is the AWS Security Specialty. From Microsoft Azure, there is the Microsoft Azure Cloud Engineer Associate, and there is even a Google Cloud Security Engineer certification. If you want to know how to get started and how to learn and pass this certification and how to eventually become a cloud security engineer, then I created a step-by-step roadmap focused on just the cloud security engineer pathway in this video, where I will show you the fastest and cheapest way to becoming a cloud security engineer, and I'll see you there.